Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's SafeHabitus webinar on young farmers' perspectives of the attractiveness of farming. My name is David Meredith. I'm the project leader of SafeHabitus, and it's a pleasure to see such a strong and diverse audience joining us from across research, policy, and farming organizations, and particularly young people with a direct interest in the future of agriculture. And I'd like to thank our partner, CEJA, for supporting this engagement. So this webinar addresses a question that is increasingly central to European agriculture. How attractive is farming as a career, and for whom? Before I begin, I want to go through a few house rules. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the SafeHabitus YouTube channel after the webinar, or at least in the next few days. We'd ask that you keep your camera off and your microphone muted, but please submit your questions for speakers using the Q&A function. And we will have a Q&A session where we will engage with these questions. And also use the chat function for comments and interaction with each other and the organizers from the technical side, ADL. Okay, so if there are any technical issues, please also use the chat function for that. If you can move on to the next slide. So this is our program for today. And I mentioned that question, which really was, how attractive is farming as a career and for whom? And that's what we're here to address. So across Europe, we're facing well-documented challenges in terms of generation renewal, but attracting and retaining young farmers is not only about access to land, capital, or training, which are all very important, but it is also fundamentally about the nature of the work itself. In SafeHabitus, we approach this through the concepts of working conditions and job quality. Working conditions refers to the day-to-day realities of farm work, the long hours, or what can be the long hours, the physical demands, the exposure to risks, the income uncertainty, and increasingly administrative and regulatory pressures as well. But job quality takes it a step further. So it includes not only the conditions I just spoke of, but also aspects such as the level of autonomy and control over work that people have, the work-life balance, income stability, recognition and social value, and as part of that, access to social protection or social services, and opportunities for self-development and overall well-being. These factors are critical. These factors are critical because they shape how farming is experienced. Like anyone with a job, these are the factors that shape how we experience our job, and farming is no different. And ultimately, how they are perceived by those considering entering the sector shape what we consider to be its attractiveness. And for anyone watching, you're probably well aware that attractiveness is not a fixed characteristic of farming. It is something that's socially constructed, and consequently, it is always evolving. It is shaped by lived experiences, by expectations, and by how the realities of farming compare to alternative career paths. And this is a fundamental issue, that there is huge competition right across the economy for young people to enter into the labour force and enter into the workforce. And those people coming from farming backgrounds are no different. And these other jobs can provide a higher quality of life in some instances, but farming has its own unique positive factors. And today's webinar is grounded in research that brings these issues and these factors into much sharper focus. And it draws on work that was led by our colleague, Maida, who you'll hear from very shortly, with young and aspiring farmers from across European countries. And it provides a youth-centered insight into the pressures, motivations, and trade-offs that define how the next generation sees farming. Importantly, this is not only about identifying challenges, it's also about understanding what makes farming meaningful. So this is the point about positive elements of farming, and rewarding, and where there are opportunities to improve both the working conditions and job qualities in ways that support long-term engagement in the sector. We're very pleased to complement the research with perspectives from the European Council of Young Farmers, who bring direct experience from young farmers themselves on the barriers and opportunities that they face today. The structure of the webinar, which you can see here in front of you, reflects this combination of research and lived experiences, and we will conclude with an open discussion to reflect on what these insights mean for farming as a career. Before I conclude and hand over to Maida, I'd just like to mention one or two things. So if you can, yes, this is it. So we will have a further seminar this week, and this is on understanding and strengthening mental health services for Europe's farmers. And again, this reflects research that was led by Maida and her team. Here we look at how can we put in place supports and services that empower and support farmers in relation to their well-being and mental health. So I hope you can join us on the 26th. It'll be at the same time. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Maida. So, Maida.
Yeah, thank you, David. I will share my presentation. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on a highly relevant topic, as David just had mentioned. My presentation will focus on the purpose and starting points of our recent completed study, which was published in Deliverable 4.3 and is available on the project website, on youth perspectives regarding the future attractiveness of farming. After my presentation, my colleague Duška will present the results of the study. The study was conducted as part of Work Package 4, which was enhancing the attractiveness of farming within the SafeHabitus project, which focuses on improving health, safety, and well-being in agriculture, and in this context, the attractiveness of farming. The starting point was that generational renewal in agriculture is a significant European issue. The problem of young farmers is frequently raised in political debates, and in the Common Agricultural Policy has for decades sought to encourage young people to enter the agriculture sector through additional subsidies. However, these measures have had only limited effect, showing that the issue is not simply a lack of financial initiatives. The question, therefore, is how to attract young people to farming and under what conditions farming can be seen as a viable, fair, and meaningful occupation. Within SafeHabitus, this involved examining how working conditions, well-being, and job quality, as said by David before, influence decisions to enter farming, remain in farming, and envisage a future in the sector. In this context, youth perspectives were placed in the center to understand how agricultural environment and work is perceived and how these perceptions shape discussions about entry, retention, and succession. The concept of the attractiveness of farming is considered in our study multidimensional. It involves not only income, but also working conditions, social security, gender relations, public recognition, access to land and capital, the territorial context, and the cultural recognition. In other words, the attractiveness of farming depends on whether it is seen as a credible long-term source of livelihood and well-being. The study's main research question was therefore formulated around how young farmers perceive current and future trends affecting work in agriculture and how these perceptions influence their decision to enter or remaining in farming. This means the study focuses not only on objective conditions, but on how these conditions are interpreted, negotiated, and projected into the future by young people themselves. This formulation is important for three reasons. First, as already mentioned, it focuses on the experience and interpretation of the agricultural context by young farmers, how do they make sense of current pressures and future possibilities. Second, it focuses on work. Farming is often discussed through production, markets, or environmental policy, but SafeHabitus is especially interested in working conditions, occupational stress, quality of life, and well-being. Third, it focuses on future trajectories. The issue is not only how farming looks today, but how young people imagine it evolving and whether they see themselves in that future. This means that we were not treating young farmers as passive recipients of policy. We treated them as social actors who interpret uncertainty, negotiate family expectations, respond to policy frameworks, and imagine possible futures for themselves, their farms, and their communities. The deliverable 4.3, which was mentioned before, did not start from the scratch. It explicitly built on prior findings from other work package for activities, particularly deliverable 4.1 and 4.2. The design of the focus groups and the guiding questions were directly informed by the evidence and conceptual frameworks developed in these earlier deliverables. Deliverable 4.1 provided a systematic overview of current and emerging stressors and drivers of change affecting farmers' working and living conditions. It mapped psychosocial and economic stressors, environmental and climate-related pressures, occupational safety and health risks, cultural norms, inequalities in social protection, and the ambivalent role of technological change. It also highlighted vulnerable groups, including young farmers. Deliverable 4.2 then extended this work by developing future-oriented scenarios. It examined how current drivers of change, particularly climate change, might evolve and interact over time, with particular attention to working conditions, occupational stress, and the attractiveness of farming as a livelihood. It highlighted increasing uncertainty in markets and policy, environmental pressure, demographic aging, tensions around digitalization and automation, and persistent gaps in social protection and recognition. Deliverable 4.3, so our report translated these analytical and foresight-based insights into an empirical study focused specifically on young people. This process identified 4 main topics for the focus groups. First, the changing agricultural context. Second, generational renewal. Third, working conditions. And finally, fourth, policy needs. Let me now briefly turn to the methodological design. The study employed a qualitative exploratory research design based on focus group methodology. Focus groups were selected because they enable participants to interact, build on each other's contribution, and reveal shared experiences, tensions, and aspirations that may emerge in individual interviews. This approach was particularly suitable for understanding how young farmers collectively interpret their current circumstances and future prospects. Data were collected through 5 online focus groups conducted between January and February 2025 via Zoom. The online format was chosen for practical reasons. In-person meetings across Europe would have been logistically challenging and costly, and it is often difficult for farmers to leave their farms for several days. Sessions lasted approximately 90 minutes and were scheduled to accommodate farming routines. Participants were recruited through several channels, primarily through CEJA membership networks, with additional support from SafeHabitus communities of practice and a public call shared on the project website on social media. The recruitment strategy aimed for diversity in gender, country, farm type, and stage in farming career. Ultimately, 17 young farmers participated. 8 women and 9 men from 10 countries: Austria, Belgium, Estonia, France, Ireland, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, and United Kingdom. They represented a range of farm types and positions, from owner-operators and co-managers to successors working alongside family members. 2 participants were new entrants from non-farming background. The focus groups followed the semi-structured guide organized around the 4 themes mentioned earlier. Sessions were recorded with consent, transcribed verbatim, anonymized, and then analyzed through thematic analysis, including coding, cross-group comparison, and interpretive synthesis. Methodologically, this study was not designed to produce statistically representativeness. It was intended to generate rich, comparative qualitative insights in how young farmers perceive their future attractiveness of farming. Finally, I want to emphasize what this approach made visible. It has enabled us to see attractiveness not as a single factor, but as a set of interacted circumstances. The findings indicate that young farmers operate within a framework of overlapping structural, cultural, ecological, and political pressures. The significance of these results lies not in the individual themes, but in their interconnectedness. In the way participants simultaneously expressed current challenges and future hopes while also revealing their limited room for action. The integrated findings highlight a constellation of structural, economic, social, environmental, cultural, and territorial factors that overlap and shape young farmers' perspectives on the future. At this point, I would like to over to my colleague Duška, who will present the substantive findings in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Majda. My name is, as Majda said, Duška Knežević-Hočevar, and I would like to present some key results from the qualitative group, focus group analysis conducted by our Slovenian team. It is important to emphasize from the outset that across all 4 topics, no, go back, sorry, go back to the first slide, yes. It is important to emphasize from the outset that across all 5 focus groups and all 4 broad topics, participants consistently expressed a strong duality. As Majda said, they spoke about pressures, insecurity, and structural limits, but also about hopes, possibilities, and concrete ideas for change. Their accounts show that young farmers do not simply describe crises, they also imagine ways in which farming could remain viable and more just. Next slide, please. Topic 1 on changing agricultural context invited participants to reflect on how they see the wider agricultural context changing and what this means for the future of farms and rural life. Based on the 5 focus groups, 9 interrelated themes emerged, as shown in conceptual graph 1. I will now briefly summarize how participants described and linked these themes. Participants described an agricultural landscape shaped by structural challenges and economic precarity, the first theme. They referred to volatile prices, rising land and input costs, weak bargaining power against retailers and intermediaries, and exposure to cheaper imports that may not meet the same standards. These conditions make planning, reinvestment, and entering farming risky. Closely linked to this theme is generational transition and farm succession. Taking over a farm means committing to long-term responsibility despite uncertainty about markets, climate policy, and geopolitical developments. Participants also stressed labor shortages and workforce sustainability, noting low wages, the declined appeal of agricultural work, and difficulties replacing retiring workers. A second cluster of themes reflects instability and uneven adaptation. Farmers experience climate change and environmental adaptation not as an abstract future problem, but as a disruption through irregular seasons, pests, droughts, and shifting farming calendars. They also see digitalization and technological disparities as both promise and inequality. Precision tools, robotics, and AI could reduce labor demands and improve efficiency, yet weak rural connectivity and unequal access to knowledge leave many behind. Participants emphasized policy disillusionment and loss of trust, arguing that frequent policy changes, unclear priorities, and heavy compliance burdens make them feel unheard rather than supported. In addition, mental health and work-life balance emerged as sources of pressure, shaped by isolation, burnout, and the need to combine farm work with off-farm employment. Young farmers, as I said at the very beginning, also expressed hopes. Many highlighted resilience and innovation amid uncertainty through diversification, niche production, direct sales, and value-added processing as ways to regain control. Gender and the evolving role of women, theme 6, was also described as a positive shift, with women often associated with diversified, community-oriented, and care-based models of farming, even while still facing barriers to recognition and capital. Hopes were linked to stronger local food relationships, regional identity, consumer awareness, and forms of technology that support rather than replace human labor. Next slide, please. Topic 2 focused on access to land and capital, family expectations, intergenerational relations, and the conditions under which young people enter, remain in, or leave farming. Across the focus group, 7 overarching themes emerged. Participants described succession as a struggle between continuity and change, reflected in the tension between tradition and innovation. They want to continue family farms, but also modernize them and adapt to new realities. This is shaped by structural inequities and gatekeeping, as access to land, finance, and policy benefits often favors established family farms while excluding newcomers and many women. Succession was also described as an emotionally and identity-laden process through emotional labor and psychological readiness, marked by silence, guilt, pressure, and loneliness. These experiences are intensified by the social imaginary of farming, that is, the wider public perception that undervalues farming and makes it less attractive to younger generations. Overarching all this is existential uncertainty about the future. Climate instability, economic volatility, and shifting politics lead many young people to question whether staying in farming is viable, especially on smaller or less protected farms. Participants also emphasized fractured learning and knowledge flows between theory and practice, formal and informal education, and rural and urban forms of knowledge, making practical learning central to renewal. Despite these barriers, participants also described aspirational models of the future farm. Their hopes present generational renewal as an opportunity to build farms that are economically viable, modernized, socially fair, and people-centered. They want earlier involvement in decision-making, respectful intergenerational dialogue, and the autonomy to shape farming according to their own values. They also hope for recognition, particularly through removing gender barriers and improving public respect for agriculture. Next slide, please. Topic 3 addressed working hours, physical and mental strain, safety practices, the division of labor on farms and in households, and perceived changes over time. Across the discussions, 6 connected themes emerged. The first is the centrality of work-life balance and mental health. Participants described round-the-clock work, blurred boundaries between home and labor, and the near impossibility of holidays, sick leave, or rest. This leads to chronic stress, exhaustion, and loneliness, often normalized by a culture of silence in rural life. A second theme, gender family dynamics and invisible labor, highlights how women's work and caregiving are frequently undervalued, while close family co-working can create both solidarity and emotional strain. These dynamics show that occupational safety and health risks are not only physical, but also relational and social. A third theme concerns technological modernization and its ambivalences. Automation and digital tools are often viewed as a relief from physical labor and workforce shortages, but also as a source of anxiety due to high costs, unequal access, reliability concerns, and the need for learning. A fourth theme, labor shortages and the successor crisis, further intensifies work pressure as farms increasingly rely on aging farmers, unpaid family members, or scarce seasonal labor. Participants also identified social perception, bureaucracy, and moral pressure as important sources of strain. They referred to public misunderstanding, bullying of farm children, distrustful controls, and a media focus on crises that reinforces stigma. Finally, all this is deepened by economic fragility and structural uncertainty, where low incomes, CAP dependence, and market volatility reduce the ability to invest in safer infrastructure and decent working conditions. Against these pressures, participants also expressed hopes for more livable and humane farming. They saw technology as a way to reclaim time and reduce strain, not merely to increase productivity. They emphasized regularity, rest, and mental well-being as legitimate goals. They also hoped for economic stability and fairer support systems, including policies that enable safer investment and paid labor, alongside community-based solutions such as peer networks, shared learning, and cooperative care arrangements. In this vision, occupational safety and health means caring for people as much as for the animal and the land. Next slide, please. Topic 4 invited participants to reflect on policies and suggest what is needed to make farming safer, fairer, and more attractive. 8 overarching themes emerged. The first theme concerns structural and financial barriers to entry and generational renewal. Young farmers repeatedly stress that access to land, startup capital, succession support, and early financing remain inadequate, especially for those without inherited farms. Closely linked to this are uncertain markets and the need for economic stability, as participants prioritized fair prices and predictable income over dependence on subsidies. A third theme is the demand for a clearer, simpler, and better targeted CAP, as current administrative complexity is experienced as exhausting and poorly adapted to diverse farm realities. Participants identified social infrastructure and support services as lacking, including maternity leave, pensions, healthcare, mental health services, and replacement labor. These are essential for work-life balance, gender equality, and generational continuity. Another theme is ecological frustration and undercompensation, where farmers feel that environmental obligations, especially in protected areas, are not fairly rewarded. This is linked to territorial cohesion and rural infrastructure, as remoteness from markets, weak services, and limited educational and digital opportunities make rural areas more challenging places in which to build a future. Participants also emphasize cultural recognition and public perception, describing how farmers often feel stereotyped as subsidy dependent, misunderstood, and socially isolated. Finally, trade and standards emerged as a cross-national concern, with participants calling for stronger protection of local markets and fair standards to ensure domestic producers are not undercut by lower standard imports. Overall, policy pressures were described as a systemic mismatch between institutional design and farming realities. Inaccessible support, excessive bureaucracy, uneven environmental burdens, and one-size-fits-all rules. Hopes, however, converged on a policy vision: fairer pathways into farming, better social protection, stronger rural infrastructure and education, and a renewed social contract that recognizes farmers as skilled professionals and stewards deserving dignity, autonomy, and respect. Final slides, please. So, what is a novel message? The individual emerging themes identified within each topic are not entirely new. What matters is the particular combination in which they appear together. Participants consistently described a duality between present-day pressures and future hopes, while also showing that their ability to shape outcomes is often limited. Because these issues are deeply interconnected, they cannot be treated as isolated problems. If the farm of tomorrow is to be both a productive business and a viable legacy that supports successors' dignity and well-being, policy responses must address the full bundle of pressures and aspirations together. Thank you. This is from my side.
Thanks a lot, Duška. Thanks a lot for sharing these insightful research results. And we can move on to the experience from the fields, because as said, today we are combining the research result with experiences from the field with three young farmers that are active in the sector. The first one is Katarina. We'll just say a few words. She's from Austria. She served as the Rural Youth Austria delegate to CEJA, and now she's in her second term as CEJA vice president. I will leave the floor to you.
All right. Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here. And actually, I found myself already in the presentation that Maida and Duška gave. So I hope I can make these examples more personal, or the factors they presented. I'm coming from Austria, where I live on a family farm. It's the one that you see below in the picture. So it's a very typical farm in Austria, depending on the structure and size. And we have breeding sows. And we produce also crops for the feed. And yeah, so in this building, actually there's integrated the living room, but also the barns are in the building, and also the storage for crops is in the building integrated. So everything is quite close together. Next slide, please. So this picture is a bit nostalgic. It doesn't always, of course, look like that. But here is, for example, our corn we grow for the animals. We also grow the barley for the pigs, and for the crop rotation we also grow rapeseed, sugar beet, and wheat. And currently we are in the planning of our farm transmission, or in its preparation. We still have some years for that for the farm transition itself, but still we are elaborating a bit our options already. And for the process of taking over, we do have several options to develop the farm. So first of all, the one option is to keep the breeding sows and to invest into the barn, because the barn would need to be substantially renewed due to the higher animal welfare standards. Otherwise, it's still in good conditions. And the second option is then, of course, if we do already have to invest into the barn, to go new ways and try something new. So I find that this is a very broad decision with many options, but I also see that very positive, so we can really develop the farm as also our abilities and skills could contribute best to the farm model. And in the following presentation, I'd like to speak a bit about the challenges that we face in this process, especially focusing on the livestock sector. Because this is the ones that concern me most, and just mentioning that there is also no listing of the challenges. So it's they are not listed from by their severity, let's say. So first of all, livestock is a very capital-intensive sector, and I'm speaking of the financial aspects here. So every decision we make towards the direction of a livestock farm is a decision that is very long-term, because it is related and bound to loans and contracts that are usually very valid for the long term, so I would say 25 to 30 years minimum. So the choice of a livestock farm is kind of a lifetime decision, or at least as a professional lifetime decision. Secondly, I want to point out the social and the labor aspects. As a self-employed farmer, we also have a forest, that I wanted to show that in the picture as well. So that's what keeps us busy during the winter. From the social aspects, for me, when taking the decision of farm transmission, is just to be conscious of the working hours. So that is, again, focusing on livestock, that you have to work on mornings and evenings to go into the barn. Also on the weekends, the animals need to be fed. It's about being conscious also about that holidays need to be planned very carefully to have the right replacement. It's difficult sometimes to take days off or to do especially longer trips. So these are just aspects that I want to keep in mind when thinking about the farm transmission process, and also being conscious about the conditions for parental leave and effects also for the family and replacement when illness happens. One other challenge is the educational aspect. So in Austria, we have a really good education system. We can stay on this slide. That's fine. Thank you. So we have a very good education system, and there are many options from the basic education and the more advanced education on the university, but also courses and advice services, etc. But in practice, I find it sometimes difficult to get really the tailored advice that you need for the farm, because sometimes like the farms are very specific, and a specific problem also needs a very specific solution, and therefore the services need to be quite tailored. And in practice, of course, everything is also different than what you learn in theory. So during the past years, I found that that I learn a lot by doing. So I have an education and an agricultural education, but still the practical side is something that is quite different and complementing on the theoretical aspects, but still quite different. And then I wanted to speak about the insecurities that we face in the farming sector that make it quite challenging. It's on the first hand the market transparency along the food value chain. It's sometimes quite frustrating when the share of the product price, when only a little share of the full product price goes to the farmer, to the primary producer. And what adds on to the insecurities is the tariffs that we saw in the US. So it's the political aspects, but also affecting the availability of goods. For example, the fertilizers right now is something that is very up to date. So due to the crisis or war in Iran, which is horrifying, but also it affected, of course, the gas prices and production of fertilizers that is impacting farming a lot, because right now is the season where plants need fertilizers. One aspect is the price volatility. I already mentioned it in the fertilizers, but it's also generally in the pigs. Every week we get updates of the prices, and it makes it difficult to calculate, especially in the long term, on your business. And then there are weather events that we are dealing with that became even more also in the past years. We had flooding 2 years ago. We had dry springs, but also late frost. We also have fruit trees, and we make apple juice. So all of this is something that we can, of course, not calculate with. We can be prepared by different measures. We can have insurances and risk management, but not everything can be anticipated. And this adds a lot to an insecurity in the farming sector. So for me, the transmission is a lot about finding the right choice for oneself, because it's a very substantial choice with effect on the long term. And I'm aware that farmers across Europe face very different situations, but I believe that we somehow face similar problems, even though they're specific on its own level, but on a certain level, the problems are similar. And that's why the CEJA network and the advocacy and also this webinar has to be proven to be very important to me. Also to raise the topic of generational renewal, to speak about farm transmission and address the structural changes that agriculture is currently facing. I want to end with a positive note, and we can go to the last slide, please. Something that gives me stability during all of these challenges and insecurities is that I know that this is the life I feel home in. So a life where, yeah, I think the image maybe says it very good. So it can be very beautiful in many times, despite all the worries. And that is what it's worth working for. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Katarina. Thanks a lot for the presentation and the nice picture, especially this one at the end. Thanks a lot for the reassuring words as well and the nice words. And I think now we can we move from Austria to Bosnia and Herzegovina, where where our host, our second speaker from the field is from, Angelo Deni, who's a marketing manager and entrepreneur from Bosnia. I will leave the floor to him and enjoy the speech.
Thank you for introduction. My name is Angelo Deni. So I'm a young entrepreneur from Bosnia. I'm involved in developing a hazelnut plantation and agricultural brand with my family, and I'm also a member of young entrepreneur network in Bosnia. So basically, we have a hazelnut plantation. So 17 years now it's old, and we started it like a hobby version, and then as we progressed we saw a huge potential in that, because agriculture today, it's not only about producing resources, I think it has a huge potential as a brand. So you make your own brand. I'm not from how to say, not schooled for agriculture, but building my own experience in agriculture. I came from a tourism branch, and with help of my friends, we came across of how to say it. We overcome any obstacles we face because we have our network of young entrepreneurs that combines young farmers in Bosnia. We have around 300 members, and they're not all like farmers. They are every branch. We organize educations for young farmers and projects because main obstacle for young farmers today it's accessing to the land, because old farmers are, let's say, not giving up on their lands, and they are not willingly to let younger generations to show what they can do. And that's why we have programs with our government that leases the lands to the young farmers with financial help to start a business. And also young entrepreneur network organizes educations and workshops, trainings, like sorry, how can I translate that? My agricultural business, where you are schooled for a month. You are presented with like facts, what you need to do in a business, and you get financial support to start your own business. And throughout that period, you get educational support and mentorship. And we are working on developing on rural tourism, improving technology, implementing new technologies in agriculture. And our members are mostly people younger than 40 years, yes. But anyone who wants to improve agricultural can be our member. I think that's all what I have.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Angelo, for telling us about your experience. And I just want to remind everyone that you have the Q&A button here in Teams at the top of your screen. So if you, instead of maybe noting down your questions, if you want to include the questions you have, or maybe some clarifications you want also from the researchers, or some questions you want to ask to our speakers from farmers from the field, please do so, and then we will have final wrap-up sessions moderated by Mario, where he will take the questions from the floor. Okay, so thanks a lot, Angelo. If you don't want to add anything, I just want to thank for your presence and your intervention, and we can move to the next speaker, who's James Luis Benedetto from Italy. He's a first-generation farmer, and I leave the floor to him. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. A lot of the topics have been approached previously, so hopefully I'm not going to bore you with my perspective, but I think it's very important to share, maybe my experience, my opinion on the attractiveness of the sector, my role in the association world, and also a conclusion that wraps everything up. So my name is James Luis Benedetto. I'm 28 years old, and I'm a first farm generation from San Sepolcro in Tuscany, Italy. I represent Coldiretti Arezzo as a provincial delegate, and I serve as a vice delegate for young farmers of Coldiretti Tuscany. My background, though, is not agriculture, as I studied business management in London, which was an incredible experience that gave me great insights on the economy and how the world really works. And for some time, I experienced that, faced fast-paced rhythm city life, full of opportunities to undertake, but I quickly understood that in speed and efficiency, you lose something which is very important, the high quality of life that you can actually perceive in the countrysides. This led me to fall in love with agriculture because it helped me managing, the connections and combining between nature and management. And so I chose to return to Tuscany and build my own farm from scratch. Today I run an agriturismo farmhouse, Borgo Benedetto, where I produce organic olive oil, and I'm starting a wine project combining traditional agriculture with hospitality, territorial identity, and innovation. When I first started in this industry, in this sector, and working in agriculture, one of the first things that I was told was, if you can do something else, do it. That shocked me a bit, but it wasn't cynicism, it was realism. It was a direct way of describing a sector that gives you a lot, but also asks everything from you. And so I started 8 years ago in March 2018, while I was still finishing university. It wasn't starting from an active farm, but from abandoned buildings to restore a neglected olive grove, which took me many years to take back, and a few hectares of open land. Basically, it was a blank canvas. And that sounds like an opportunity, but it really means that everything had to be built from scratch: time, knowledge, work, resources, but above all, I needed to have a clear strategy of where I was going. So the renovation had to be done step by step because the scale of the work and the financial effort didn't allow everything to be done at once. And in the middle of this, COVID arrived, which slowed everything down. But it really stopped me, actually convinced me to continue, because renovating the buildings on the property, believing that after COVID, the trend of rediscovering serenity and health through a slower pace and in contact with nature and good living would explode as a trend, attracting people from cities back to the countrysides and becoming less of a niche market, rather a choice, just like I realized when I was in London. And looking at my experience, agriculture is a beautiful job, but definitely not a simple one. It's made of constant decisions, often taken under uncertainty. And that's when I understood something very important. In agriculture, you never really start from zero. You always start with more to manage than you initially expected, as there are variables you cannot control. And this brings me to an important point. Today, agriculture is presented as an attractive sector, especially for younger generation. Many young people approach it with enthusiasm, which is a very positive thing, because they see a sector which is connected with their values and their vision, which is innovation, sustainability, authenticity, and quality of life. This is only a part of the reality. The problem is not that the vision is wrong, it's only incomplete in my perspective. What is often missing, and it's actually the most difficult part to transfer and communicate, is the complexity of this sector. Because we face, like other sectors, but we've got deeper difficulties and challenges, because we face economical pressure, geopolitical instability, changing markets and trends, and also climate change. But sometimes I think we should, instead of being discouraged by those challenges, we should try and look inside of them and transform them into opportunities where it's possible. And I'll give you a clear real example. For example, in 2023, I was taking into consideration the many challenges that I was facing, and I focused on one that I certainly couldn't really personally mitigate, which was climate change. I took a decision and tipped the problem on its head and trying to take advantage of it. And what did I choose? I chose to invest in wine at almost 600 meters above sea level in an area where there's no official production guidelines because it's never really been considered a suitable wine growing area. But I was convinced that with the increasing temperatures, it would have created the conditions to change that and making it an interesting area. And from the outside, this may look like innovation, but in reality, it's something else. Looking at it from the inside is a real bet because you don't have any references, no established path, and no real certainty. And like this, when you realize something crucial, innovation in agriculture is not just about having a great new idea, but it's about taking the risk of being wrong without really knowing how it will turn out. But remember that this is the main characteristic of a real entrepreneur. He believes fully in what he does, even if he hasn't got the crystal ball. Obviously, all that shines is not gold, and it doesn't always go as you planned or imagined. Let me give you a real example of this year. I did not harvest a single olive, zero. I did all the pruning, all the cleaning operation in the late winter, the fertilization, waiting for the spring and natural cycle to take over. Firstly, as olive trees need wind to impollinate each other, during the period of impollination, we suffered heavy rains, which led to a very low olive fruiting. And secondly, in the second part, which was the harvest in the weeks of October, just before that, about 2 weeks before, we had a severe fly attack, which led to compromise the already limited production. This means a full year of work and commitment without a product, and therefore an economical loss. And this is when you truly understand what agriculture means in my perspective. You can work well, you can do everything right, but there are factors you cannot control. And you have to be able to withstand them by, yes, mitigating them, but also diversify. And this is part of the agriculture that often does not reach a younger generation. And for this reason, I decided to invest part of my time in representing young farmers through Coldiretti. Not only to be their voice and their ears with the institutions and administrations and defend their needs, but also to help others mitigate and reduce mistakes, to create dialogue and to promote collaboration between farmers and stimulate at the same time innovation and sustainability in a more realistic and practical way. So the real question now is not whether agriculture is attractive or not. The real question is, how do we reduce the gap between perception and reality? On one side, we have a sector that needs new energy, new people, new ideas. On the other side, we have young people who are interested, but often lack the tools to fully understand what awaits them in order to create successful businesses in the long run. The goal is not to reduce enthusiasm, don't take me wrong, as it's an essential element with passion in this job, but it also needs to be supported by awareness. We need to present agriculture what it really is. It's not an opportunity, but it's also a responsibility, not only a project, but it's a long process. And it's not only an idea, but it's a real profession. And if we want to make the sector truly attractive, we need to promote a more objective and honest narrative and be transparent about it. One that says, yes, it is hard work, is a complex sector. It's also a field that can give you a lot and can give you a lot, especially to the ones that are willing to invest, not only financially, but also and especially mentally and physically. And despite everything, there are moments when you understand why you do it, and when something works and you see the concrete result of your hard work built over a long time. It's not immediate, it's not easy, but it's something very real, and it's a kind of satisfaction that's hard to find in other sectors and elsewhere. Agriculture does not need to be made more beautiful. It just needs to become attractive, but it needs to be made more understandable and accessible. Because the real attractiveness of a sector is not the image it projects, yet is in the real possibilities it offers to those who choose to pursue it. And if we manage to build this bridge between experience and perception, showing both the challenges and its real potential to create lasting value, then the interest of younger generation will not just be a trend, but a solid and conscious choice. And for me, agriculture is passion, responsibility, competence, difficulties, resilience, honor, and satisfaction. In one word, you can summarize it in life. So thank you for your attention, and if you've got any questions, please ask me.
Thank you very much, James, for your perspective. With you, we've concluded the presentations from the young farmers that we invited. Different perspectives that I think can open up for different discussions. And for this, I hand the floor to Mario, who will be our moderator for the final session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Gianluca, and thank you so much, everyone speaking today. Indeed, I think that the 3 stories presented today has been really, really inspiring also, because they came from 3 different young farmers from 3 different contexts, 3 different sectors, and 3 different backgrounds when entering in the agricultural sectors, where I see that is really, really interesting for our webinar and for the project itself. Just to remind everyone viewing this webinar that if you have any questions, please use the Q&A section here in Teams, or even the chat if you prefer so. So again, I want to thank first SafeHabitus project for giving this opportunity to give generational renewal a priority place in the project, giving this research, involving directly young farmers in all the activities, and even promoting and supporting young leaders in agriculture, as you did, for example, in the second edition of our EU Young Farmers Leadership Program, where you create a session involving different young farmers and what are the different challenges in promoting generational renewal. So thank you so much. Coming back to what I was saying before, as I say, the 3 stories that we hear today are really, really coming from different contexts. However, I think that we also hear really similar challenges and similar stories. I think the 3 of them mention the different challenges that they have on access to land, on labor challenges, long working times, the lack of holidays, also climate changes. So maybe I will ask, while I give some time for the viewer to ask some questions, I will ask to all the speakers, both to our young farmers, but also to the researchers, Maida and Duska, how do you see this similarity of challenges between the different sectors, the different geographical areas? Do you see any specificity in terms of sectors? For example, I know that Katerina mentioned in her presentation some specific challenges that they have in the livestock sector. Also, I know, Maida and Duska, that you have more in-depth research on the gender specificities of agriculture, and also wondering whether coming from outside the EU in Bosnia, also Angelo, you have any external perspective on the access to the agricultural sector. So maybe feel free to speak directly, but if you have any insight on that.
Well, yes, I completely understand your comment. It is difficult to go to specificities. Of course, there are specificities, and in all 5 focus groups, these specificities were mentioned. For instance, let's have just one measure about social protection. So we have different European states with different social protection policy, with different pension system, not only for general population, but also for farming population. Here are specificities, definitely. However, the common denominator of all discussions is that social protection is only a theory, so to speak, that doesn't function in practice in some cases. For instance, maternity leave. For instance, in Slovenia, we have beautiful policy about parental leave, maternity leave, father's leave, and so on. However, in this particular occupational group, women say that this is a theory. They cannot afford the same maternity leave as in other occupations, for instance, although the law is the same, let's say, right? And because this is particular occupation regarding its profit occupation, so there are different rules. Then we also have pension system, which is different. And yeah, but you know, we have different measures. However, this challenge is almost the same. Okay, Katerina mentioned that educational system is qualitative in Austria, right? However, when it comes to gender, maybe female students are addressed more in certain directions compared to men. Maybe there are more, you know, entrepreneurship or mechanization or things like that. These topics are more focused on male, or maybe they're more encouraged to go to this direction. However, we also have these alternative farming models, which are gendered, like, I don't know, tourism caring and you know, social farms and so on, or community solidarity farming and so on, or agriculture. So we have different models, and it is important to maybe to go into detail, or how to support gender, right? That women are not excluded from, I don't know, entrepreneurship or this or that, or that such activities can be better supported. Yeah, I would stop here, maybe.
Thank you, Duška. I don't know if anyone else wants also to react on that. At the same time, we also have some questions right now from the chat, so maybe I can ask those questions and give you also the opportunity to reply to the first question at the same time. So, Katarina, there is a question for you asking about the services of the SVIS, the social protection system in Austria, if I'm not mistaken, for farmers, and whether you have any experience with tailored social services from them. I will take also the opportunity to extend this question to the more European wide perspective, whether you have here at CEJA level with our members any perspective on the need for better social protection, better pension systems, or any other topic related.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a quite a specific one, but a very relevant one for the professional farming. And with the SVS, I mean, I don't have all the details from other countries, but in the farming sector, we're rather happy with that system, because there is a real pension, let's say, for farmers. However, there is still a strong gender gap, but this is, I would say, this is more related to the system itself. So how you share the ownership of the farm, how you share the childcare or other family services on the farm. Yeah. But for the retirement system and also healthcare, the SOS is very good for us. But as Duška said, like maternity leave, then, for example, is difficult to realize because you need a tailored replacement service, which is especially if you have a farm with an older barn and some specificities, it's not so easy to train also then the replacement services. Yeah, if that answers the question. And I would be interested also in hearing a bit, the other perspective on social security in farming, if you have any.
Yes, thank you so much, Katerina. Maybe if any of you want also to react on Katerina's questions, feel free. But also wanted to ask a specific question also to James, because of course I see your projects in farming as you're really inspiring, really motivated, full of ideas in your first years. I wanted to check whether this is have been impacted by the different working conditions and social aspects of the farming sector. Whether, of course, you see rural life as a higher quality as the urban life, as you mentioned at the beginning, but at the same time, you recognize the different challenges on more working conditions, job quality. So how does have been impacting those years that you have been in farming?
So I think, as I explained earlier, I was attracted by the opportunities of a city life and the opportunities that could have given me in terms of, banking, insurance, and all sorts of channels I could have undertake. But what I studied was business management with entrepreneurship. So the only thing I wanted to do really was to become an entrepreneur. Either for big corporation, so specific management or manager, but in this case I managed to combine the two things, nature and management. So this was an opportunity, and that I really chose wisely. A lot of people went not against, but they said to me, "Are you really sure? You've studied for something quite different from agriculture." But I always answered with a simple answer saying, I can actually withdraw my knowledge and put it where I want. And so nature and farming was very attractive for me because it gave me the opportunity to do something from scratch and pursuing, transparency, because I wanted to create something that could have been also sustainable in the long run. And so, I think the perception also of the agriculture and the farmers has changed in the late years. I see more attention from the politicians as well. They're concerned about, the future of the sector, or at least the way we perceive it. So I think we're living in a moment which is very positive for agriculture. But that's what the focus was on my speech was, in fact, be more honest about it and not hide the problems, because by hiding the problems we give a false image of the sector. I, for example, run my business completely by myself. I get to 75-80% really of the operations, and then where I can't get I have to get involved with other businesses that help me, pursue the job. Because as you can imagine, with all the rentals, the guests, the experience that I need to do, the association world, and then the wines is a certain year, the olives as well. So I've planned it as well, so I could manage it mainly by myself, because as you can everyone said, it's hard to find labor or somebody that can come in case you get injured or you got a maternity leave. And at the same time, pension, for example, in Italy for farmers, though, it's a bit hard topic, because I think the average is probably around 600 euros, which is not really livable standard. And therefore, farmers tend to finish their career until, they're 80, really, in farming. So they love their job, definitely, but also they're forced into that mechanism. But again, I think it gives great opportunities. But we have to see it in the long run and be objective about it.
Great, thank you, James. Maybe before passing to one question that I have for the researchers, I also have one specific question to Angelo. You present the different activities and how your association work in Bosnia and the great job that you are doing there. Recently, you have been also involving yourself as an organization at the European level, and I wanted to understand better which opportunities you see while engaging and connecting with young farmers from other countries in Europe, in the European Union, and how do you relate to the different perspective that other young farmers from other geographical areas and other sectors have compared to those in Bosnia? Sorry.
Thank you. I think that's one very, very important thing, because I look at that as a human being. One human being cannot do everything and cannot know everything. So you need to get some knowledge from somewhere else. And if we have a connection with others farmers in Europe, and for example, I have a problem in my hazelnut plantation, and I can ask my colleague in Italy, in Turkey, they are great hazelnut producers, and they can help me with that, answer me questions. Maybe I didn't know, we didn't, how to say it, some sickness in hazelnut tree. Here in Bosnia, we don't know about that, but maybe in Italy, there is someone who came across with that, and he can help me. So I think that's very, very important to connect peoples from all over Europe to share our experiences, so we can upgrade ourselves.
Great, thank you so much, Angelo. Indeed, this is really important. Yes, sorry.
And I want to mention, James talked about pension system in Italy, and I have to say in Bosnia here it's pretty much same, because that's the problem I said earlier. Older generations of farmers are not letting younger generations to aspire. Because of that, they have to work till they are 80, and here the pension system in Bosnia works like you are paying yourself. So if you are paying bare minimum, you're not gonna have a pension to live with, and if you are paying a little bit more, or you're gonna have something. But I think on one of our meetings in my network, we talked about that, and it's not yes, it is a problem, but it's not a great problem as a maternity leave and sick leave. As a farmer, I think you are not allowed to get a maternity leave or a sick day, because there is no one who can change you, replace you. And on those days, you are sick For example, you get a flu or you get injured, you are out for 1 week. You don't get paid sick leave. You are losing money, and in crop season or seasonal production, here, harvest season, you are falling behind. So that's a huge problem. And I think workforce nowadays, it's not a huge problem. It's still a problem, but it's not a huge problem because there are a lot of machineries that replace workforce. But still, the sick leave and maternity leave, I think that's the one of the biggest problems in agriculture.
Thank you, Angelo. Indeed, I think it's something that we have been also discussing a lot in this project, but also in CEJA, and fully agree. Maybe I will pass to a question that we have for the both researchers, Maida and Duška. First, some good words saying that thank you for the excellent work in the research, in the design in particular, its effectiveness, and in revealing key factors and dynamics. There is a specific question that is, which of the farmers' points stood out most to you, and how do they align with what the research suggests about the attractiveness of farming? So, yeah, I don't know if Maida or Duška want to reply.
Yeah, a few words. Yeah, our study showed that the farming occupation is a very complex occupation. So it's not just working in nature with animals and plants, but it's much more. It's really occupation which is specific also from the point of view that farm families working together, that family members also affect each other, not just nature, which was highlighted very strongly here in the discussion. So our study, in short, presented that farming is really the complex occupation, while the policy so far was oriented to this profession only as a production, not seeing the whole spectrum of the farming environment, that it involves so many elements, not just the income, the subventions, the economic incentives. So far policy was lacking their attention to the social infrastructure, which farmers also needs to survive and to live decently. As it was said, maternity leave, parental leave, father leave, it was completely absent from the horizon of the policymakers. And the discussion on the mental health issue also showed that farming is also attacking by this. Also other occupations are for sure, but that farming needs more attention also in this field. That actually, as I said before, farmers should not be seen only as a producers, but as the human beings which need destiny and also support in this.
Yes, thank you so much, Maida. And I don't know if there is any last questions from the viewers. Otherwise, I will start closing this webinar. So thank you again to everyone watching this webinar and everyone that will watch it later offline. Also, thank you, of course, to the SafeHabitus project, to David, the coordinator, the researchers, Maida, Duška, and all your team, and also to Aidel, to Gianluca, and to Ana Maria for this organization and for all the work that you are doing in the project. Indeed, we are really happy from the with the results of this research from this project and this webinar, it aligns perfectly with all the discussions that we have internally at CEJA with our young farmers in Europe, especially on working conditions and on job quality. There has been some recent development also internally in CEJA. We have an internal foresight exercise where we discuss all the different social policies needed for young people to enter and continue in farming, where we tackle all these topics that all align with the research results and with everything that have been presented today on work-life balance, on mental health, equal opportunities, the rural services, all the social protections and adequate pension system that are needed in farming. So this is my key point, that indeed promoting generation renewal is also contributing to the achievement of the different European Union's social objective, and this should be recognized by all of us. So again, thank you very much, and especially thank you to the 3 young farmers that I have shared their stories today. Really, really inspiring. Angelo, Katerina, and James, thank you so much. And I think that we will continue our work really soon. Please, you can check the social media of SafeHabitus project. There is a webinar on mental health on the 26th of March. So please also register and attend this webinar. It will be really interesting for all of us. And thank you so much again. And I wish you a really nice Tuesday.